Witness B, then at paragraph 26, you deal with how Mr. Molefe was then linked to the Swart murder. Can you take the commission through this process?
Let me first explain to the commissioners as to why are we here in the first place. It starts from a tender that was awarded to a group called SK. And then the SK group, the awarding process itself, it shows that there was a problem because the two competitors, it was Swart and Mountgate. When we do investigation, we can tell now that those two were just domain companies, meaning this SK didn't have any competition to start with. But I'll go back to SK itself. SK itself, it's connected to the person called Lucky Molefe. Lucky Molefe is the nephew to Katiso Molefe. This SK group was awarded this tender, and then after it was awarded this tender, all we can tell it was a manipulation because of these two companies. Already Lucky Molefe is the buyer, is the one who was facilitating this process. So already Lucky Molefe knew that he's going to give it to SK because these ones were just there to make it look like, but it was not really the true reflection of the competition. There was no competition for SK. However, what makes this thing complex is that we have a company called QTech that has a relationship with Transnet for over 40 years. And it has been supplying Transnet with, they call it springs and accessories. I don't know the right word, but it's a small spring. I've seen it during the course of my investigation. That was supplied to Transnet straight from them as they are the manufacturers. However, in 2023, they were surprised because they learned now that there is this SK group coming to them to buy the very same spring that they normally supply to the Transnet. But in this instance, it looks like the tender was awarded to SK, and their first surprise, it was normally the tenders are advertised, and this one, it was never advertised. They were surprised to see that there was actually a tender by this SK coming to them to buy these springs. But it gets worse because now they sell these springs with legally like 3.95, but nothing more than 4 rand each. However, the SK group, when they submitted their purchase order to them, they were shocked to see they selling the very same spring that was 3.95 to Transnet on the price of 151 rand. And then when the inspector to inspect the springs before they were released, they raised a concern to say, how are you aware, Transnet, that you're buying something that worth less than 4 rand with 151 rand? And then the inspector said, no, we're not aware, but I'm going to escalate to the managers, of which, according to the inspector, he didn't. But eventually, like, he got to know about the grief of the QTech. That's where the problem started now, because suddenly there was a new purchase order with now an amended price that was now 5 rand 10 cents. That was sent to QTech now. Now they've got two different prices with two purchase orders. Seeing what they've seen, they've decided now to report this matter. There's a whistleblower from the company that decided to report to the Department of Enterprise. And then that's where everything started. Then the department tasked the Transnet to have an investigation. Then investigation ensued, and then eventually, like he was requested to finish the processes of the tender that was awarded to SK, of which he delayed. He delayed up until the 12th of April. That's where everything started to connect the dots to our case now, because the investigating officer from Transnet, he then now confronted him to say, I need those processes, papers. So, and then we see something happening now in this case. Exactly on the 12th, we see Tao driving to Katiso Molefe's house, according to the data. And then also the tracker, the vehicle tracker. And then they both drive to QTech for the first time.
Witness B, if you can then start at paragraph 26.6. This is now where you deal with the relationship between Mr. Lucky Molefe and Katiso Molefe and his, I guess, the request for assistance in this regard once the scheme was discovered.
This is now, as I've said, that on the top, that's when now the investigating officer from Transnet requested those documents from Lucky. And then
just to assist you, Witness B, this is where you start to deal with the communication and information from the cell phones, which shows you the communication between Mr. Molefe, Lucky Molefe, and Mr. Katiso Molefe, as well as Mr. Puletau.
The communication, it's mostly between Mr. Molefe and Tau, and then we then see them meeting like personally on the first time on the 12th. After like we learned that he was requested to bring the papers, but instead of like bringing the papers, we see action happening between Tau and Molefe. When they start now going to the very same QTech to scout, you could see that from a data that Tau drove to Katiso's place, and then they were together picking up at the same tower at Katiso's place. Shortly, they didn't even take some time. Shortly, they both seen driving together to Bernachem at QTech. And then from there, they go back to Katiso's house. Then Tau goes his way.
And does the scouting only happen on the 12th of April?
That was the beginning. That was the beginning of it. That's why I'm saying it was triggered by the investigating officer requesting these papers. Now it seemed to be urgent. Something needed to be done urgently. Otherwise, there was going to be problems. Because from the 12th, there was a scouting. The 13th, there was a scouting. The 14th, there was a scouting. The 15th, there was a scouting. The 16th, there was a scouting. Subsequently, Armand was killed on the 17th. But there's things that happened in between. We see Katiso sending a name and a number of the intended, supposedly they thought it was a whistleblower, but let me just say of the employee from the QTech, he sent it to Tao. Tao started sharing this with her girlfriend named Lerato, asking her to search and find who is that person, of which Lerato indeed she searched until she find the intended target with his boss, and she sent it back to them, to Tao, let me not send it to them, send it back to Tao, Tao send it back to Katiso, and they agreed that this should be him. And then the scouting continued, and then we could see there was a testing of vehicles and so forth. And in one of the days, we could see Tao's piano there up until the knock-off time where everybody will leave QTechs. I think they were trying to identify the target. And what is notable, after the 16 from scouting, they go back to Molefe again.
Witness B, you say at one point Katiso Molefe sent details of employees of QTech to Mr. Tao.
That's correct, Commissioner. Yeah. That's when now he sent the cell phone number of the person that was intended to be shot, that was believed to be a whistleblower, and the name. I don't know if it's safe to call out the name of the victim.
No, Witness B, that's not necessary.
But it was not Mr. Swart, is that correct?
No, it was not Mr. Swart. It may be worth me mentioning that in all of this, unfortunately and sadly, Mr. Swart was never the intended target. It was a mistaken of identity.
I don't think we should get to who the actual whistleblower is. Let's leave it there for their own safety.
Yes. Yes.
Witness B, at 26.8.4, you say on the 12th, first Mr. Tao is seen driving to Mr. Molefe's place, and then they both drive to the location for scouting. How do you know that they were in that vehicle together to the location for scouting?
Commissioner, we know that through the call data. It's the call data that informs us that you can see from the Tao's call data and tracking reports driving to Molefe, and then from Molefe's house, according to call data, they both driving, picking in same towers up until at Vernachen QTech, where they were scouting. Why I would refer to say they were driving together, I'm very much aware of the explanation that he gave during the bail, that he forgot the cell phone inside Tao's car. But I'm not convinced, commissioners, because in between he was making calls, let alone receiving calls. Receiving call, I will maybe give him a benefit of the doubt, because even Tao can answer. But making calls from your phone, that's extreme. And I know he was using iPhone, and I'm definitely sure that Tao wouldn't be able to access iPhone without him, because I know the securities in the iPhone. I'm using an iPhone.
Thank you, Witness B.
Witness B, you wrap this section up at paragraph 26.9, where you talk to the motive. Can you explain this to the commissioners?
Yes, the motive, yeah. Hence, I reference to the 12th. We say we see something common about the dates, the 12th, because the 12th is when now, like, he was pressured to give the documents, and knowing that there was manipulation in this, and that to have costed him his job and everything that he worked for, And then instead he reached out to the uncle, and the uncle called out to the friend, and they both start scouting as immediately as they eat the 12, because the 12 is the genesis of why we are here now.
Sorry, Witness B, what's your belief that Mr. Lucky Molefe ordered the hit based on?
It's based on this SK tender and the whistleblower, because Commissioner, the actual person that was intended to be killed here is the whistleblower that was blowing the information in this SK tender thing. So unfortunately, we find Mr. Swart being killed, but not the person that was intended to be killed, because now it was creating problems for Lucky at work now that the investigator was busy now needing to have these documents. And the same documents was going to reveal that these two companies that he said they were in competition with SK, they actually non-existent. And the SK itself, it has its own problems, because the investigation has revealed that even that it was a pawn in Lucky Molefe and Thapelo Molefe, who's the son to Katiso Molefe's pawn, because when the money was paid now, maybe I don't know if I'm going too forward, but when the money was paid now to this SK, it gets paid to SK account, but the whole amount is transferred to Thapelo Molefe's account, and Thapelo Molefe is the one paying people, including the so-called director of SK. He's getting as little as 30,000 out of 1.2. So now it tells you who are the mastermind of this SK group and this tender. And it gives you a clear picture why Mr. Molefe was interested and had to do something.
The report to Mr. Katiso Molefe after the murder that I think it said, Abuti, we are fine, something like that. So I would understand the basis for inferring or concluding that Mr. Katiso Molefe could have ordered the hit.
Commissioner, can I add a little something on Molefe?
Yes.
Molefe, meaning Lucky. Lucky is the person who awarded this tender to SK Group. And Molefe is referred to as the buyer at Transnet. Definitely Molefe, Lucky is not the first time he buys these certain springs from for Transnet. And Molefe is at the liberty to look at the history in the system for the people who have been supplying them with the springs, of which at the most, the people that maybe were expensive, they were not above 6 rand mostly. I'm not talking about where he facilitated, where other employees facilitated the process. The least it's 6 rand. But in every tender where he was involved, it's 100 plus. So, what I'm trying to put out there is to say, Molefe, it's not only this tender that he awarded in this fashion. So opening an investigation for him, it was crucial, because it was gonna expose not only this and others as well. That's why this whistleblower had to be taken care as quickly as possible before everything come to light.
And perhaps Witness B, just to clarify with reference to the infographic, there's a dotted line next to Molefe on the right where you mentioned that further investigations have found other schemes. Can you explain that briefly?
That's correct. Unfortunately, that's it's still under investigation, but it's safe to say it's more than one. It could be 10, 15 or 3, but it's more than one.
Thank you, Witness B.
Sorry, Commissioner. One last information that I forgot to include where QTech is concerned. That's why it was so important to eliminate QTech, is that on the system, they've been having this relationship with Transnet for over 40 years. But when at the first value investigations were done, it was so strange that they were not appearing in the system. Somebody had deleted them so that it can never be seen.